divorce is kind of writing up a 27-page document defining your life for the next 27, for 18 years, whatever it is. And doing that with someone who you don't get along with and you're ending your relationship is a very difficult task. I was working with a new client. She says to me, like, how do I know whose side you're on? And I was like, there are no sides in divorce. The best, most successful divorce is two parents who have the most of what they can get. They're both happy and the kids are happy. But the very important foundation is that you could have an argument and both people could be right and both people could be wrong, not necessarily as one right and one wrong. And taking that approach, people feel listened to, people feel heard, and they really are. Like, I've seen divorce documents set up by mediators, and it's absolutely ridiculous. Like, there's no way any of it makes any sense.
Welcome to the Too Dad to Quit podcast,
the podcast where we highlight stories of dads on the other side of divorce
to inspire and give strength to dads going through it.
I'm Ben.
And I'm Yoel.
Welcome back to the Too Dad to Quit podcast. You can find us on toodadtoquit.com, Too Dad to Quit on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. We have a YouTube's Clips channel. Please like, subscribe, share, and rate the podcast so that we can get our message out to as many people as possible. If you have a story that you want to share, we want to help you share it. So please reach out. Don't be shy. And this week, we are sitting down with Yaakov Kessler. Yaakov is originally from Baltimore and has been living in Israel for the past 18 years. Yaakov is married with 5 kids and has been involved in divorce mediation, and he has a lot to share on the topic. Yaakov is currently working in the financial department of a medical company in America, but thinking about getting involved in divorce mediation full-time because it's something that he's passionate about and he loves doing. So welcome, Yaakov. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome. So I'd like to just, what brought you, halfway around the world for the last 20 years?
I mean, to be in Israel?
Yeah.
Well, I guess it was classic. Like, I came to Israel, after high school and kind of stayed. I just loved it. I felt very connected here. I felt very spiritually connected here. And I realized that's something important to me. If I wanted to live a more spiritual life, it would meant being here. So I stayed, and I've been there since.
Wow. And where are you now, by the way, for our audience? Because we see a nice background, and it's not a...
Oh, yeah,
this is a real background.
This is like the camping trip, the 3-day camping trip with the kids that we're doing here at the Kinneret.
Wow. Looking good. Sounds peaceful. I don't know if our audience could hear the birds chirping in the background. Beautiful weather.
Oh, it's a beautiful spot. I like to do a lot of trips with my kids, a lot of nature, and this is actually a gorgeous, gorgeous spot next to the Kinneret.
Nice.
How old are your kids?
Yeah, that was my question.
I got 12, 11, 8, 4, 5, and 4.
Wow, your oldest is 12, going down to 5 kids from 12. Wow. All right, nice. You got your hands full.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely, I love being a dad, and I love the name of your podcast, like Too Dad to Quit. I just one passionate thing I am about what I'm doing is, also dealing with dads that are really taking responsibility for their kids, and it's a special thing. It's a really, I would say most people I know, a lot of the trauma comes from the parent figure, the father figure, or the Rebbe, or the something, and it's such an important role to fill and do well. I think it's so special that you guys are just taking on this challenge of like being the best dad you could be, in challenging situations.
Appreciate that. How did you get into divorce mediation? Like what brought you, being happily married yourself, thank God. So what brought you into the divorce mediation world?
A couple relatives of mine, I helped them get divorced. There was things were kind of stuck and not moving forward, and I kind of just got in there and just saw it through till the end. And I just saw that a lot of, I guess, divorce is kind of, writing up a 27-page document defining your life for the next 27, or 18 years, whatever it is. And doing that with someone who you don't get along with and you're ending your relationship is a very difficult task. So I just saw I have a natural understanding of people, and I just was able to see each person, see what their needs were, and push it through. And then it kind of, took off from there.
And when you say it was a relative, so, like that first time, how were you able, I assume you were able, as a mediator, you've got to be as unbiased as you can. Obviously, human emotions always play a role, and we may have our own, understanding of events, or we may see things in a certain way, but obviously, when you're wearing a hat as a mediator, you've got to be unbiased. So, I heard you say relative has got you started. So how do you sort of take off that bias for a family member and try and remain neutral?
I think this is like a foundation of divorce. I was working with a new client. She says to me, like, how do I know whose side you're on? And I was like, there are no sides in divorce. The best, most successful divorce is two parents who have the most of what they can get. They're both happy and the kids are happy. Successful divorce means that it's fair, that it's best for both people. One-sided squeeze and you force the other person to certain things, that won't last. It will come up a few years later, something, there's always ways to get the other person. A fair divorce is going to be a successful divorce. So it's not about sides. It really is about finding the middle ground that makes everyone happy and working with that.
So did you know both, I guess, because you started with family, you knew both parties to start, correct?
Yeah.
And were they married for a long time? It wasn't like, you just knew them for a year. Like, you really were invested in their relationship as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm here in Israel, so it was, I guess, I wasn't with them the whole time, but yeah, I knew both parties for a long time.
And did they turn to you, or you just kind of stepped in and were like, hey, guys, this makes no sense. Let me see what I can do?
Yeah, I kind of got involved just as a family member, just to be helpful. And it was just hearing one side and hearing the other side and hearing the other side and going back and forth. And really being able to see an objective perspective and see what needed to be done, and was able to successfully work it through. And it was very impactful for me, to be able to use my strength of understanding of other people and also understanding law, what's enforceable, how exactly you should write it, what's necessary to be in the divorce agreement, what isn't, what has to be worked out, what has to be expressed. It kind of just really stuck with me as something which is very in line with my skill set. So it was really nice. I really enjoyed it.
How do you, I was wondering about that, especially, with my other hat as an attorney, a licensed attorney anyways. I don't really practice that much anymore, but I definitely did in the past, not as a family lawyer, but not being legally trained. Did you just educate the heck out of yourself to get yourself informed, or do you work with attorneys? Like, how do you stay informed about the law?
So again, I wouldn't say that, I think it's a very separate hat to wear. I wouldn't take responsibility for anything in regarding the law. Like, obviously, you have to consult your lawyer regarding the law. What I mean to say in regards to the laws, as you write a clause in the divorce, having an understanding of how it should be written and what's important to include in it, and what's important to fight over is more what I meant, as opposed to I'm not actually knowledgeable about the law. I think every person should have a lawyer. That's really a separate, very often I'll say that's something, question for your lawyer. That's not something I could advise you on. But I think the understanding of the details, someone cares about something, someone's passionate about something, it might not be important to include into the documents. It might be something you have to work out on a social level, just being in touch with the other spouse and being expressive and learning how not to be triggered and kind of moving past that emotional blockage to have that conversation as opposed to including it in a divorce agreement.
Right. And obviously, I guess it's kind of a double-edged sword, because I used to act as more of a community mediator, not in the family context. I mean, there were family elements to it, but it wasn't in the divorce context. And I think it is important. I used to advise people, it is important to have your attorneys, because there are legal consequences of what you're doing. But I don't know if you found this or if you have any thoughts about this. Sometimes, you not only need two parties to collaborate, which I wanted to ask you about. We'll get to that after, hopefully. But leaving that aside, assuming the two parties are willing to try to mediate, you need the lawyers to be on board too, to be cooperative, right? Have you experienced this, whether in your family mediation work or, from what you've experienced or heard from others, that sometimes the lawyers can do some damage, right? Like you could be coming to terms with it. So how do you navigate that? Is there a solution to that? Is there a way of working through that to try and not have the lawyers undo it?
I think it's part of for me, it's a part of the mediation. Listen, I would even define what I'm doing a little bit more in divorce support than mediation. Mediation kind of is more, generally, is more in the law type of category. And it's like, instead of going back and forth with the lawyers, like we have a conversation. I really try to be much more inclusive in my support. And when the lawyer got involved and when things happened, I tried to be directly in touch with the lawyer, and also just advising exactly how to deal with it. Sometimes people expect lawyers to be having their best interests, and their approach is very helpful at times because it's law-driven, but also very hurtful at times because it's law-driven. And advising them how to hear what the lawyer is saying in a healthy way, and to take the good out of what they're saying, and be empowered to be in control of the situation. Because ultimately, the lawyer works for the client. I try to be supportive in the whole situation, but we definitely had lawyers get in the way.
Right.
So I'm just trying to figure out, what's in your background. I know we were speaking before the recording that your father is a rabbi, and I know that usually that comes with some sort of personality of listening and advising. Did that have any impact on it? Where did you what part of your personality? I don't see many people running to get involved in this kind of a situation. What part of your personality was I think I can help? Where did that come from?
Listen, I always was a listener. I was always the type of person that had these conversations where people really opened up to me, and I think it just clicked. I think it's just something that happened to be in the right place at the right time, and it just clicked. It's not something I ever would have thought. I mean, I thought about going to school, becoming a therapist, but I didn't ever think about I'm going to be a divorce advocate, or be involved. But it's been I really enjoy it. I find it very meaningful. The effect that I see on families that are doing better. Both spouses are blossoming. The kids are doing well. Their parents are co-parenting with the kids. It's really meaningful to see that impact. So I think it just clicked.
Growing up, were you also when kids got into a fight, you were the one that was like, hey, chill out, everybody, let's figure it out? Any of it?
That's
right. It really just happened.
Yeah, it just happened. I don't remember really being there as a kid. I think no. I think it just really came out in this category.
Interesting.
And with your kids, I mean, they're still young, right? But do you find that you find you have to sort of implement those skills, that patience,
Absolutely.
that listening in terms of your...
Hey, maybe that answers your question, but also I think definitely, like, first of all, I take my parenting very serious, and yes, I definitely mediate a lot with my kids. A real nachas moment for me was I was laying down and I heard my two youngest fighting, and my daughter went over to them. She says, guys, why are we? There's no reason to fight. Come, and she took one of the kids aside. Come, Tilvia, I want you to tell me exactly what happened and what do you need. And she basically just listened to both sides, and the fight just stopped, because most of the times people need to be listened to, and it's definitely something I try to train my kids. Like, listen to what the other person's saying, listen to what they need, not just what they're saying. Like, what are they saying that they need, and see how you could be there for them. I definitely involve my mediation in my kids a lot, just mediating their quarrels. It's an opportunity to look at the person and see what they need. And I'll give an example of my kids. Like, one of my daughters, Shalva, she loves playing together, and she loves having fun, but she doesn't like get involved when we're cleaning up together, so it gets very contentious. So, like, I have taught my kids that she likes doing things together. Like, just say in a way like, come, let's clean up together. And that teaches them to, like, be sensitive. This is the other person. This is what they're thinking. This is what they need. And this is how I could interact with them in a way, in their language. So my kids will say to her, like, come, Shaba, let's clean up together. It's so much fun. And she'll jump in and have a great time. But I think that's definitely something I implement very heavily with my children.
And what about, this is maybe a personal question, so you feel free to answer or not answer, but what about in your own marriage? Like, have your dealings with, in the divorce, what was the word you used? Not mediation, support. Has that influenced or instructed or helped you in terms of your own relationship with your own wife, sort of seeing how things could fall off the rails and some of the things you have to do to maintain that relationship, a strong relationship with your wife? Because we all know it's challenging to, keep that bond strong, especially with children and so many responsibilities.
Listen, one thing I definitely tell divorced couples is that there's no such thing as divorce, meaning people think they get divorced, they walk away, and it's over. No, you're dealing with the person forever, and it's learning the skills.
Yeah.
And this is something we talked about before. It's learning about the skills that it takes to have a successful relationship, and it's not easy. And I've definitely called out people and said, listen, like, this is what you're doing wrong. Like, this is like, you're approaching it incorrectly, and showing them that. And that's definitely reflective on myself. I think for me, I take more responsibility in my own marriage. Not because, like I was saying, that it could fall apart and there's something, but seeing how small little nuances of character, how they could play out in destroying a relationship and being hurtful for the other person, has made me more sensitive to being a more sensitive person, and working on myself and trying to be there in ways for my wife that I never would have thought of without,
What about with the couples? Let's say, is there something you could think of where you've said to somebody, where you've noticed that somebody's taking the wrong approach? Is there something you could think of, not to put you on the spot, but something in that instance, like, in the midst of a support that you're doing, where you feel like somebody's being unreasonable in a certain way, or they're not listening? Is there something specific that comes to mind?
Just an example off the top of my head, I remember very recently, like, one of my clients getting very triggered by his daughter, for being very similar to his wife. And I tried to show him that his wife is a person who has tremendous strengths, and it didn't work out for whatever reason, but those strengths are strengths, and his job as a dad is to take those strengths and harness them for the positive. And his daughter, he's our dad. Like, so instead of being reactive to his kid and maybe, like, taking a step back in the relationship because of this trigger, like, to empower him to be there for his kid and see the positive attributes in the kid, and really allow them to harness those kohos to do good. And I think, again, that's very meaningful for me to, again, he's a great guy. He's very receptive to, not everyone is, but he was very receptive to it. And it was like I saw immediate change in how he approached the situation.
Yeah, nice. That's so interesting because I noticed that with my kids as well. Not that I have a, straight A's, 100% success rate, but, obviously there are challenges in interacting, in my life with my kid's mother. And I definitely, there are times where I see a certain similarity, and it's very easy to get triggered. And on the other hand, there are so many things. It's interesting. There are things that I may not appreciate in terms of how a personality trait affects me vis-a-vis my ex-wife. But when I see it in my kids, I could appreciate it. It kind of like what you're saying. I guess I subconsciously was kind of implementing what you said, that there are certain things, and also it's a bit personal, so I'm not going to get into specifics. Also, out of respect for my kid's mom, but like there are certain things that I find very challenging in my interactions with her, but in my kids, I can really appreciate it. Like you said, maybe, sort of leverage it and harness it for the positive. So you can totally relate to what you're saying. It's very interesting. I never thought of it the way you put it, so I appreciate that.
Right.
Good. Go ahead, Ben. Yeah.
And how are you approached by the husbands, by the wives? Like, who is it? Both?
It's been both. I'm saying it really
word of
depends.
mouth?
Yeah, it's been a word of mouth. I should be like official, like have a website and
Instagram,
book calendar meetings, and these different things. I don't really want it to become like my whole essence, but yeah, it's been a word of mouth, and I haven't been doing it so much. I do feel like it's something that I've been having a huge success in, and would like to pursue, for doing it in a larger way.
Do you think it's the saying goes, it takes two to tango, and something I've heard about a lot from different people is that I tried everything. Like I really wanted to mediate with her or with him, or I really wanted it to be peaceful, and it just it didn't have to be this way. Do you find that you need both sides from the get-go to be willing to work together, to collaborate in that sense, in terms of trying to come to a peaceful resolution? Or could somebody who's initially very resistant, is there a way to sort of bring them on board? Do you feel like there's a way to do that?
Yeah, I think that's part of what I try to do is it's we have an idea of an aguna, and it's a very unfortunate and painful situation. But I think a lot of times our view is that it's a very malicious, intentful thing from the guy's perspective. And
sorry, can you explain for our audience aguna? I mean, Ben and I know, but can you explain what that means for our audience?
In Jewish divorce, the male has to initiate the divorce. So in a situation where the guy is not ready for the divorce, the woman would be in a stuck situation where she couldn't get divorced and move on.
Got it. So carry on.
So in those situations, what I've tried to do is tactfully work with whatever means possible, to work with the non-participating party, to engage them in whatever means possible, because it's a very difficult, painful situation for the girl, and again, like I said before, it's also about support. It's a very difficult situation, and the Jewish community doesn't really have necessarily a system where they are actually working with women to like really support them from top to bottom. Successfully getting divorced. You have people who are active on social media but actually pursuing it to the end, they don't necessarily have support in doing so. It's also very painful. The rabbis of the Beis Din are necessarily, that's not really their job. Their job is to facilitate the actual halakhic divorce, but a very hurtful situation. And again, I try to engage the unparticipating party in whatever means possible to try to get them on board. And I've been successful with that as well. Again, I think my approach is always, there's always two good people with two good sides of the story. And that has to be true. A very important foundation is that you could have an argument and both people could be right and both people could be wrong, not necessarily as one right and one wrong. And taking that approach, people feel listened to, people feel heard, and they really are, because I really stay objective, and I think it's about finding what each person needs and working with that.
And it's the whole topic of aguna. It's a very explosive topic, so I kind of, I want to be gentle about it. People are very passionate about it. But as you said, a lot of times it's not always, it's not, there's no justification, let's just say, in terms of certain actions that are taken sometimes, right? There are definitely, I'm sure, cases where there are men that will use that as a leverage or something like that. So I'm not talking about those black and white cases, but at the process of divorce, I'm not talking about, when something's been going on for 10 years or whatever. Would it be fair to say that there are men who have a sort of fear as well, that as they're trying to work through the painful process on their end, there's this fear that they're going to be instantly labeled or called out or anything like that as they're trying to preserve their interests in the negotiation of the end of the divorce? Does that make sense? Like, do you ever find that?
Yeah, it definitely happens. It's a very hot topic, and I think people's approach to divorce very often is, okay, it's not working out, like, just get divorced. But it's not simple. Like, it is, again, I think it's a different category. The halakhic divorce is really a different category than a civil divorce. That halakhic divorce doesn't require any stipulation of what do we do with the kids, what do we do with the assets, what do we do with, there's so many details. I'm sure many of your listeners know there's so many details that need to be worked out and taken care of. Who pays for that? Who takes that? What time you drop off the kids? What happens when there's all these details are not required for the, halakhic divorce. And I've very often the guys are like, wait, just 1 second, like what, like what's happening? And quickly it becomes a lot of pressure to just get divorced, when there isn't necessarily something in place for what the next step is after that.
Right. In other words, like, I could totally, again, I totally understand the aguna concern. I mean, you'd have to be an idiot to not understand that concern, maybe that's a bit strongly worded, but I totally get it. But I do think that, at least from the perspective of a man of the fears of what happens next, is also a legitimate fear, right? In other words, like, there are cases where men find themselves without any sort of, without anything. And it's also complicated in that respect, because they sort of don't know how to approach this peaceful resolution without feeling that squeeze type of thing. That's all I'm saying. So, like, for our audience, I'm not talking about justifying, the whole idea of not doing the halakhic yet or anything like that. I'm just talking from the aspect of working with both parties to understand their needs, like you were saying, to be sensitive to that as well, as opposed to like holding it over one person or anything like that. Because I think a lot of people could feel that.
In fact, I tried to bring things out in, which are not being discussed as well. Like I'll sense from someone like there's something bothering them, and I'll say, like, let's stop. What's bothering you? And you have guys that, let's say, their approach to marriage was always being accommodating. I'll just give in. I'll give her what she needs. And, that might be the reason why it wasn't a successful marriage. She might need someone who's more in control. And I'm not saying who's right and who's wrong, but especially in the divorce, he might take the approach of like, you know, I'll give her what she wants, whatever she wants. And then there's not this sense of like, hey, what's best for your kids? You want to do what's best for your kids. And I'll try to engage the guy into overcoming that challenge and seeing his own needs and want to express his own needs and see, exactly what he wants. Listen, I try to take the approach not to define what's right and what's wrong. I can definitely hear that someone not getting a get, regardless of any stipulation, whatever, or if nothing's worked out, is wrong. I try not to focus on what's right and what's wrong. What's the next step and how do we successfully move forward? So just tell me what you need and let's hear how we can accommodate there and move on,
Yeah. I mean, we've had a number of guests talk about the idea of, and you said it before at the outset, that this agreement, whether it's an agreement that's agreed upon or imposed by the court ultimately, is going to be dictating the terms of the arrangement for the next however long until the last child turns 18 or whatever the stipulation is. And there are a lot of guests that we've had on that said, like, now is the time that you've got to make sure you're also asserting yourself, because I think that is a mistake that many people make on both sides, both men and women, where a woman may just be exasperated. She may be scared, for example, that she's not going to get her Halakhic divorce, and that may play a role in her not asserting herself, for example, because she may be
right.
And on the other side, there may be a man who's sort of, he doesn't want to put his kids through something that he went through, for example, or I don't want to, I want to be the peacemaker and I want to be seen as the good guy, but then he pays the price for the next 15 years. So I can
not only him, everyone.
Everyone.
Again, that's why I try to work with each client, not just what they're saying, but really being sensitive to like little things that show me that there's something going on here, to really empower them to speak out exactly what they need. And once they do that, it's much easier to make a deal which will last for a long time and be a successful divorce, because when you push things under the carpet, they come out. Like, they do. So it's definitely helpful.
And how long, is there like an average of how long it takes you to do this process?
Definitely longer than people think it should take.
Because it sounds sort of therapy, sort of mediation. I can tell you my mediator was not that route. And it was, at some point she said she doesn't deal with conflict. And it got pretty dicey after that.
I would jump right in.
Right. That's what I'm saying. It sounds like you have the opposite, which would have been very helpful. And so, right. So some people think
that's what I was saying before. General mediation, like I was saying before, is that it's kind of in the category of law. Yeah. And it's like, okay, this or that, what do you prefer? But like I've seen divorce documents set up by mediators, and it's absolutely ridiculous. Like there's no way any of it makes any sense, for a long-term solution. So I think it's about the approach of really seeing what each person needs and getting into those conflicts. Like that's so important. You're setting up the next 18 years of your life. Like that has to be unwound. Like, let me hear what you have to say. Let me hear what you really need. And let me express that to her. And let me hear what she really, really needs and what her needs are. And let me express that to you. And let's find a middle ground that both people are comfortable with and that's best for both parents and best for kids.
Or both people are not, super comfortable with, but will live with. And we used to say that in law. I mean, again, maybe it's different in what you do, but in law, we used to say a good settlement is one where both sides are walking away a little unhappy, So, that often I assume is the case as well, right? Nobody's going
to. I try to go a little deeper to allow the sides to really understand the other person and appreciate the other person and appreciate the person's needs, And very often, when people don't feel like they're being heard and their needs are being met, so they kind of overly express their own needs, and then they can't really hear the other person. So if we get to a point where they could each hear each other's needs and appreciate it, so like they really are fine with, and I wouldn't even say it's a little unhappy. People are happy to give this to the other person and accommodate. That's my goal, not always.
Well, I mean, this may be outside of, because, a lot of times you're working, thanks to your efforts or thanks to the parties or both, you're working with people that are somewhat receptive. But, would you have any advice for somebody who says that, who feels that he or she is more willing to be receptive, but the other person on the other side, they're just steamrollers. They just want to dictate. They just want to dominate. And there's nothing to work with there. Is there anything, that you would say to that person in terms of how to, in other words, it may not be in the realm of coming to a peaceful resolution, but just in life, in terms of how do you deal with such a person, because you talked about how you're a listener and whatnot. Like, how do you deal with somebody who you feel is completely on the opposite side of the spectrum of what, of what your values are?
I think it's a valid personality. I think there's tremendous strength in that type of personality. Those people are very successful. They get a lot done, and I think it's a valid personality, and I think it's about understanding and accepting that it could be very helpful in a marriage, that type of personality. If it didn't work out with you, it's about accepting the other person and recognizing their strengths and finding a way to work with that strength to both people's advantage. If it's, maybe an example would be like, let's say registering the kids in school is a difficult thing for her to do, and he's a steamroller. Great, let's have him do that and put that in the agreement that he's going to take care of those things. He just gets stuff done. Using that as as using their personality to both people's advantage. Every single person, even if they're not like me, or should be appreciated. And I think when you approach things like that, then people feel like they want to do, and they want to get, and they want to engage. So.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that from I totally hear that from the side of looking at the positive of it. But you may have a case where the agreement says that, both parents have to agree on a certain school, and then one parent is like, this is the school we're going to send, our kid to. And the other parent is like, well, wait a second, let's discuss this and work this through and come to a resolution, because I don't want to send to this school. I know you want to send to this one, and let's come to a resolution. And the other parent, and this happens a lot, by the way, the other parent is like, no, this is what we're going to do. So in other words, like, it sounds good in theory to look at the positive attribute, but a lot of times it can lead to a stuck situation, because that parent is just only sees a dominating way. You know what I mean? And it makes things very difficult. Is what I'm trying to.
Again, I think here there's two elements of things. There's the law element. Like, is that legally acceptable? If the agreement says they have to decide together, so you can't change the school without consent.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Sorry to cut you off, but that's what I was going to say, because the parent who feels not the dominating personality doesn't want to just give up on everything. They're not just going to say like, yeah, do what you want all the time. Like, I heard one person give over that advice to somebody, like, just do whatever she wants. In this case, it was, the woman that was the dominating one. I'm not saying it's always the case, but it was like, just do whatever she wants. And I don't, as you were saying before, I don't think that's healthy either, right? For the guy to just always be giving in, or the woman always to be giving in to the guy, and just not asserting his or her rights, right?
Right. So that's what I was saying. But besides the law part of it, there's also the emotional part of it. And again, what I would try to do in this situation is coach the non-dominant party, just express what your needs are. I'm sure in their marriage, it was a big part of what failed in the marriage. He was dominating, and the other just giving in and not feeling comfortable about it and building resentment and distancing themselves from the relationship and recognizing that's what's happening, being aware of that's what's happening. And then, sometimes people approach when they feel threatened like that is to get very aggressive. Don't be aggressive. Just express what your needs are and say, this is unacceptable. If we need to go to court, we'll have to go to court, but I can't have my kid go to that school. It's not something I want. Just expressing that in a calm, collective way. You're just defending your rights and defending the agreement. So I think there's a lot of coaching of that party of just to be able to get past those emotional elements to the divorce or the marriage, where we're children.
And so there's also a thing called a parental coordinator. Are you familiar with that? That's like, so I guess post-divorce, there's this, I guess, if the parties still are having issues trying to figure stuff out, the court may send a couple to a parental coordinator, which basically is hearing both sides, but they have the interests of the children in mind. So just listening to the way you work and why you enjoy this work, that may be something that you also may want to look into. I don't know if it's around the globe. It sounds like something that you may also excel at, that you should definitely look into.
Great. I mean, I've definitely been involved, post-divorce as well. Just things come up, and so it's a hard situation, and things come up. So it definitely doesn't stop at signing documents. For sure.
I mean, it sounds like you're very good at earning a couple's support and trust, right? So if you didn't have their trust, I don't think you'd be successful. And once you have that, then if there's anything they disagree on, you are that person that can be the middle. Much like a good therapist, but post-divorce therapy for a couple is not the usual thing. Does it sound about right?
Important. Yeah, listen, I think it's very important not to decide anything. I try to be a middle ground of communication between the two. I think there's a lot of triggers. There's a lot of, the marriage was unsuccessful, so you're trying to work out, these nuances of camp or summer plans or how to divide the summer vacation. Things can get heated, and to just communicate it the right way could go really smooth and be really successful.
Yeah, and I can speak in terms of trust. I mean, I met Yaakov at a barbecue, and I instantly felt like a rapport with him. Ben, so Yaakov, I definitely think you have that energy and charisma, because I instantly, we had just met and we just had a great conversation right off the bat. So yeah, I agree with Ben. You definitely have a lot of talents that can be expanded in that area. This is kind of unrelated, but it just popped into my head. I mean, you live in a community that's mostly, thank God, very, couples, families, right? I don't know. It doesn't strike me that there's a lot of singles or any, right? For example, versus where I live in the area of Jerusalem, where I live, there's a lot of singles. And I'm wondering if because of the work you've done, are you more sensitive, do you find, or conscious of, have there been situations where you've had couples friends and there's been a divorce and, you've had to sort of navigate, continuing that friendship? Have you had those situations, or are you more mindful of that? Because I can tell you, a very, at least for me and for many guys that I speak to, a very difficult part of the divorce process is not only the divorce from the spouse, it's also the divorce from the friends, especially in the Jewish community, where a lot of the friends are very couples oriented, and you have people over for the Sabbath, for Sabbath dinner, Sabbath lunch, and all of a sudden that's gone. Some people carry on, as it were, but some people, change their lives completely. They move out of the neighborhood. Is that something you've experienced in terms of people that have gotten divorced, friends, and you've tried to be mindful of that, or it's not really something you've dealt with?
Well, not something I've dealt with out of my work, but I think within my work, it's something I try to be very conscious of is maintaining good relationships with the surrounding peripheral relationships within the marriage. Like there's no reason for grandparents not to be connected to their, ex-son-in-law or whatever. It's not. I think a lot of people take the approach of like whose side are, and it's not really about that. It's the best, what's best for the kids, and very often it's just important for people to look past what happened. It didn't work out. It's okay, and to maintain those relationships as much as possible, because I think relationships build the surrounding secure environment for the kids, and there's no reason to do that.
Yeah, I mean that's
unless there is. No.
Sorry, what'd you say?
I said unless there is,
Yeah, I mean, but that's a good segue, and Ben could probably knock me for this after for asking this question based on some private discussions we've had offline. But you mentioned the whole idea of in-laws, and there's no reason to not still be in touch. And unfortunately, in many cases, when a woman or a man decide to divorce, people unfortunately do kind of circle the wagons and decide like the only way to support our daughter or to support our son is to completely cut off all communications. And it is unfortunate. And I'm wondering, do you feel, and I'm going to ask a question which answer I may or may not agree with. So I'm doing this for Ben's sake because he doesn't want me to censor myself. So do you feel that the in-laws can potentially play a role, or are they too emotionally attached? Like, let's say a daughter comes to their parents and says like, I'm having these marital difficulties. I think I want to end it. Do you think there's a role that the in-laws could play to try and see if maybe there's something they can do to help the situation, to get involved, either, to see if they could sort of, be involved to save the marriage, so to speak. I know that sounds very simplistic and juvenile, but it's the best way I could put it. Or if things are going to end, to be involved to sort of help with as peaceful a resolution as possible. Or do you feel like that's just too difficult for a parent to get involved, or it's too emotional for them to deal with their child in that way?
That's a great question. I mean, obviously it depends on the situation. Every parent's going to be different. Again, I find that parents have a very difficult time with it. It's a very difficult subject. And like you said, I think a lot of parents feel that their support is by being on their child's side, which means cutting off relationships with their ex-spouse, ex-in-law, or son-in-law, daughter-in-law. And I think you have to have a strong balance between, being involved could be very hurtful for the marriage. I think in general, in-laws being involved with their kids' marriages could be very hurtful. At the same time, you don't have to run away, and finding that place where, you could be supportive in a positive way. So I guess to answer the question, I think it's very dependent on the parent and the relationship and what could be done in a non-hurtful way, or so to be balanced, sensitive to the balance of the relationship to understand what you could and can't do there. So, listen, I think it's important. I think people feel like divorce is such a bad thing. I think sometimes that notion in itself is very hard and makes it very difficult. And I think it's important to feel like it's okay. It didn't work out. This is the new situation, and how to make the best of it. I think that's an important approach towards moving on. Is being okay with the situation,
or accepting that this is reality, and what now, and how do we how do we maximize where we're at today?
Yeah, I think that's what your podcast is a little bit about. Is that, hey, now we have a role to fill. in a stronger way than ever before, is that I have a job to be a dad. How am I going to do that?
Mm.
And speaking of dad jobs, this is the Too Dad to Quit podcast. So we do ask all of our guests to share a Too Dad to Quit moment, the moment where you were the proudest of your kids. You think about that moment, and your face lights up, and it could be a small thing, could be a big thing. If you could share with our audience one of those moments.
I'm getting stuck in that, what I shared before about my daughter, like just that moment where she was, in a situation where she was practicing that mediation on the two younger kids. I really felt like impactful of her really receiving my message and implementing in her own life. It was something very special.
Nice. And I know we've had a lot of advice and a lot of tips, and this was a very deep discussion. But if you have some advice, some tips, and anybody who's going through divorce, thinking about getting divorced, that you would give them to help them through it, to help them have clarity if it's the right thing to do, we'd really appreciate that.
I think, it's very hard for me to, advise someone if they should get divorced, not get divorced. I can't make that for some decision for someone. But I think if that's something you're considering doing, I think it's super important to have support and make sure you reach out to friends, family, and you're expressive the whole way through of the need for support. It's a very difficult situation, and people will be there for you. Just reach out to people and try to surround yourself with people that could support you through difficult times.
Wow, amazing.
Very true.
Well, thank you, Yaakov.
Thank you, Yaakov.
Really appreciate your time, taking time out of
This was great.
Yeah.
It's very important to me. I think it's something I'm very passionate about. So.
Yeah, I saw that when we met, so I'm very grateful that you joined. It's great. It was great to have you on. Thank you, man. And on vacation. Now you can.
I'm glad you reminded me. I was in full vacation mode, not checking my calendar.
All right, great. Well, go back to that now. You go enjoy the family.
Well, before you run away, this has been the Too Dad to Quit podcast. You can find us on twodadtoquit.com. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next week. Opinions. Some or all of these views and opinions may not be shared by Ben, and or Yo. Thank you for listening to the Too Dad to Quit podcast. Available at twodadtoquit.com. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode.